Inside ADX Florence, prison food that breaks minds. The tray slides under the steel door. A small carton of milk, a square of cornbread, and something gray, meatloaf so dry it crumbles like dust. The inmate stares at it. He hasn't spoken to another human in weeks. He eats the same meal at the same time, every single day. And in that silence, this food is more than just calories. It becomes a weapon, not of knives or guns, but of the mind. Because here, inside ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America, even the meals are designed to break you. But how does something as simple as food become psychological warfare? To understand that, we need to go back. The Supermax kitchen, cooking for ghosts. The kitchen at ADX Florence is massive, but strangely quiet. Cooks never see the prisoners they serve. Every tray is portioned, sealed, and delivered through steel slots. It's food without a face, no choice, no voice, no interaction. But here's the catch. The meals aren't meant to satisfy. They're meant to control, blunt or repetitive, colorless. Some inmates joke that it feels like eating punishment on a plate. For men locked in silence 23 hours a day, this sameness starts to gnaw at their sanity. And yet, it gets worse. The loaf. When food becomes discipline, when an inmate breaks a rule, anything from throwing food to acting out, guards can strip them of normal meals. Instead, they get the loaf. It's a block of mashed up beans, flour, and vegetables baked into a tasteless brick. No flavor, no joy, just fuel. Some call it Nutriloaf. Others call it edible cement. Inmates dread it because it isn't just punishment for the body, it's punishment for the mind. Eating becomes torture. One man described it this way: after 3 days of loaf, you start to feel like you're not even human anymore. Silence at the table, the loneliness of eating alone. Most people eat with family, friends, or even strangers in a cafeteria. At ADX Florence, every meal is eaten alone. A tray slides under the door. The inmate eats on a steel stool, staring at concrete walls. No sound, no laughter, no conversation. Psychologists say this routine erodes the human spirit. Food isn't just fuel, it's culture, memory, comfort. Here, it becomes a reminder that you are utterly cut off from the world. Some prisoners whisper that the silence around the food feels louder than the hunger itself. And one inmate, after years inside, made a chilling claim. The food isn't what breaks you, it's the way they make you eat it. A tray that tells a story. The meal that shook the unit. One day, a tray arrives that isn't normal. The bread is moldy. The meat patty smells strange. An inmate refuses to eat. He shouts through the steel door, pounding until his fists bleed. Guards ignore him. Hours later, other prisoners begin yelling too, banging on doors, demanding answers. The silence of ADX is broken. The food, once a tool of control, suddenly sparks rebellion. But the question is, what really happened that day? Was it a mistake in the kitchen, or something darker? When silence turns to noise, the banging on the steel doors grows louder. Thud, thud, thud. Each inmate, locked in his own concrete box, joins in. Inside ADX, you almost never hear voices, but now it sounds like a storm. Prisoners yell through vents, the only way they can speak to each other. Word spreads fast. The food's rotten. They're messing with us. It's not just hunger anymore, it's pride. Food has become the last line of dignity, and when that's taken away, men who have nothing left can become unpredictable. And that night, something shocking happens. The milk carton signal. A silent protest begins. The next morning, guards slide the breakfast trays under the doors. Most inmates don't touch them. Instead, they push them back out, leaving the milk cartons lined neatly in the hallway like silent tombstones. In a place where almost everything is stripped away, letters censored, visits cut off, voices silenced, this act of refusal is powerful. For the staff, it's a nightmare. ADX is designed for control, but how do you control men who would rather starve than eat? The warden fears this protest could spread, and he's right, because hunger, whether real or symbolic, can break chains faster than violence. The guard's dilemma, control versus compassion. One officer, new to ADX, makes a mistake. Seeing an older inmate pushing back his tray, he whispers through the door, "I wouldn't eat it either." That one comment spreads like wildfire through the vents. Now the prisoners believe the guards know something is wrong with the food. Rumors grow. Was the rotten tray intentional? Was it punishment disguised as a mistake? Or was something more sinister being tested? By nightfall, the protest has doubled. Hallways echo with clattering trays shoved back under doors. And in the middle of it all, a single question hangs in the air. What happens when prisoners in the most secure prison in America all refuse to eat? The Hunger Standoff. When control cracks. In ADX Florence, nothing is supposed to rattle the system. Every movement, every sound, every meal, calculated. But now, the rhythm is broken. Guards walk the tier, collecting untouched trays. The sound of clattering steel pans against the concrete floor echoes like warning bells. Some inmates press their foreheads to the tiny window slots, staring out, unblinking. They don't speak, but their message is clear. We're not eating. Prison psychologists are called in. They warn that even a short hunger protest in solitary confinement can spread like fire in dry grass. Inmates who normally never talk suddenly share a single cause. And for the administration, this is dangerous, because control at ADX isn't just physical, it's psychological. If that breaks, the entire prison shakes. Breaking the line. A test of willpower. Day 2 of the protest begins. Breakfast trays slide under the doors again. Scrambled eggs, a slice of toast, a carton of orange juice. This time, almost every tray comes back untouched. One inmate, furious and starving, hurls the milk carton at his steel door. The splash runs down the bars like blood. Guards rush in with shields, but the man doesn't fight. He just laughs, wild and broken, shouting through the door slit, "If the food won't kill me, the hunger will!" His voice carries through the vents. Suddenly, dozens of inmates begin pounding in rhythm, their fists echoing through the concrete. It's not just a protest anymore. It's a declaration. We'd rather starve than be controlled. The warden's choice. Fear in the control room. Inside the prison's surveillance hub, officers stare at monitors. Every camera shows the same thing. Prisoners sitting, staring at their trays, untouched. The warden faces a brutal decision. Do they break the protest with force, pepper spray, shackles, emergency teams? Or do they bend, giving the inmates what they demand, and risk losing control forever? He knows one thing. If the protest continues, inmates will grow weaker, angrier, and more desperate. And in ADX Florence, desperation is the most dangerous weapon of all. That night, the prison is tense. Every sound echoes louder than usual. Every shadow feels heavier. And then, one prisoner does something no one expected. When protest becomes weapon. On the third day of the Hunger Standoff, a tray is slid under the door of cell 213. Inside sits a man who hasn't eaten since it began. His ribs press against his skin. His eyes look hollow, but his mind is burning with defiance. He picks up the bread from the tray. He lifts it slowly, not to eat, but to tear it apart. With the crumbs, he begins scratching words into the floor. A message to anyone who might see later. They tried to break us with food. And then, in an act that shocks even the guards watching through the slit, he smears the rest of the meal across the walls of his cell, marking the concrete with food as if it were paint. It isn't madness. It's a message. Food is no longer nourishment. It's rebellion. The prison erupts without violence. Word spreads through the vents again. Soon, other prisoners follow. Meals are shredded, smeared, tossed back out half-eaten. The hallways reek of spoiled milk and crushed beans. ADX Florence, a place where silence is law, now echoes with pounding fists and clattering trays. It's not a riot. No fires, no blades, no direct attack. But to the staff, it's something even worse. Because the very system built on absolute control is being tested with nothing but trays of food. Guards report to the warden. They're uniting. And in ADX Florence, unity among inmates is the one thing feared most. When hunger crosses the line. One night, an officer collecting trays freezes. On a return tray, written in ketchup, are 3 chilling words. Tomorrow, we stop. No one knows exactly what it means. Stop eating? Stop protesting? or stop something else, something far more dangerous. The prison tightens lockdown. More guards are stationed on the tier, but inside the cells, inmates sit in eerie silence, saving their strength for whatever comes next. And as midnight passes, one question grips everyone. Inside ADX Florence, guards and inmates alike. What happens when men with nothing left to lose decide their food is no longer enough? The empty trays. When dawn breaks, guards roll their carts down the tier. One by one, trays slide under the steel doors. But this time, nothing happens. No trays pushed back, no pounding fists, no shouts through the vents. At first, the silence seems like victory. Maybe the protest has ended. Maybe the inmates have given up. But then, officers notice something chilling. Not a single tray is touched. The eggs are cold, the milk cartons still sealed, the bread untouched. By noon, it becomes clear. Tomorrow we stop, meant a full hunger strike. No eating, no compromise, nothing. The body weakens, the mind breaks. On day one, men pace their cells, restless. On day two, the pacing slows. Inmates lie on their bunks, conserving energy. By day three, guards report men trembling when they stand, their voices fading when they shout through the vents. Psychologists warn, starvation doesn't just weaken the body, it warps the mind. Hallucinations, paranoia, despair, all are coming. And that is exactly what the prison fears. Because desperation in a place like ADX doesn't stay silent forever. Breaking point in cell 322. On the fourth night, an alarm sounds. A prisoner in cell 322 has collapsed. Guards rush in with medical staff, dragging his limp body out on a stretcher. His lips are cracked, his skin pale, and the tray in his cell still sits untouched. The hallway fills with shouting from the other inmates, banging, screaming, howling. The silence is gone, replaced with chaos. And as the stretcher wheels past the cells, one voice rises above the noise, chilling and sharp. He's the first. Who's next? A choice with no winners. The warden calls an emergency meeting. The hunger strike has crossed into medical danger. If inmates begin dying, the prison could face lawsuits, investigations, even riots across other federal facilities. But giving in would mean the inmates we. And in the entire philosophy of ADX, control through routine, silence, and food would collapse. So he makes a decision, one that guards whisper about for years. In the middle of the night, staff prepare a new plan, a way to end the hunger strike, by force, when control turns to force. It's past midnight when guards move down the tier with a new kind of cart. Not trays, not food, medical gear. The order is clear: end the hunger strike, by any means necessary. Inmates watch through the narrow door slots as officers in gloves and masks approach. Shackles rattle, restraint chairs are wheeled into place. One prisoner whispers through the vent, "They're not feeding us. They're going to feed us." The most hated punishment. One by one, inmates are removed from their cells, strapped into chairs, their heads tilted back. A rubber tube is forced through the nose, down the throat, into the stomach. A liquid mixture, high-calorie supplement, warm and bitter, is poured in. It's called forced feeding. To doctors, it's survival. To inmates, it's humiliation. Some gag and choke. Others thrash against the straps until their wrists bleed. One man whispers through clenched teeth, "This isn't food. This is control." And as word spreads, the strike doesn't end. It transforms. The war isn't over. The hunger strike shifts into something more dangerous. Some prisoners begin hiding food in their cells, stuffing bread into cracks, saving packets of sugar, turning meals into bargaining chips. Others fake compliance, pretending to eat, only to vomit later in their sinks. Food has stopped being nourishment. It has become a weapon, a language, a line between survival and surrender. And through the vents, one phrase echoes again and again. They can feed our bodies, but they can't feed our minds. A new kind of hunger. Weeks later, the hunger strike officially ends, but the damage is done. Inmates who survived are weaker, gaunt, and hollow-eyed. The prison has reasserted control, but at a cost. Because now, every tray that slides under those steel doors carries a message. To the guards it says, "We are in charge." To the inmates it wisp. Here's, you are never free, not even at mealtime. And in the silence of ADX Florence, the food doesn't just fill stomachs. It fills minds with fear, defiance, and the memory of what happened when men decided not to eat. News escapes the Supermax. Officially, ADX Florence says little. Reports are vague, filed under inmate disturbances. But whispers always find a way out. Letters smuggled through lawyers, coded messages and phone calls, and even hints dropped during court hearings begin to spread the story. ADX inmates were force-fed. Prison reform groups seize on it. Journalists start asking questions. And soon, the hunger strike that began in the silent cells of Florence makes headlines. America's toughest prison faces food protest. Other prisons take notice. Inmates in state and federal prisons across the country read those headlines too. At Pelican Bay in California, inmates refuse chow hall meals for days. In Rikers Island, men in solitary push trays back under their doors, chanting through vents. Even in small county jails, word spreads. Food can be more powerful than fists. It's not just rebellion, it's communication. A way for the powerless to send a message that can't be ignored. A battle of narratives. The Bureau of Prisons insists the ADX strike was handled safely and within policy. They claim forced feeding saved lives. But rights groups argue the opposite. They call it cruel, degrading, even torture. Lawyers file lawsuits. Human rights organizations demand transparency. Inside ADX, prisoners hear about this through legal visits and news snippets. For the first time in years, many feel something strange, hope. Not hope for freedom, but hope that their silence, their trays, their hunger actually reach the outside world. Hunger as a weapon. Even after the strike ends, the legacy continues. Prisoners begin to see food differently. Every tray, every loaf, every sealed carton is no longer just survival. It's leverage. The guards know it, the administration knows it, and the inmates, above all, know it. Because the truth is simple and chilling. In ADX Florence, see, the world's harshest prison, the most dangerous weapon isn't hidden in a shank or smuggled in a letter. It's sitting on a tray, an infamous name. In one of the isolation cells sits a man whose name once dominated headlines. A man so dangerous that the public was told ADX was built for him. He's no stranger to the violence, to power, to living with enemies. But here, in the silence of Florence, his toughest enemy is the tray that slides under his door 3 times a day. Each meal is the same: gray meat, powdered potatoes, watery soup, no seasoning, no choice, no joy. For years, this man commanded armies. Now, his war is with cornbread that crumbles like sand in his hand. The meal becomes the clock. Prisoners at ADX mark time not by hours, but by meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, that's the rhythm. For this inmate, those trays become both lifeline and torture. At first, he forces himself to eat every bite, telling himself, "I control this food. It doesn't control me." But weeks turn into months. The monotony gnaws at his mind. Soon, he skips meals. Then, he smashes trays against the wall. At one point, he writes in ketchup on his cell floor. Even kings starve in cages. His guards see the change. His eyes sink. His body thins. The man who once terrified the outside world is now wasting away, undone not by bullets, but by boiled beans. A silent collapse. One night, after refusing meal after meal, he doesn't respond when the guard does rounds. They peer through the slot. He's on the floor, barely breathing. A crumpled tray sits untouched in the corner. Medical staff rush in, tubes, straps, liquid feed forced into his body. His face twists with rage, not at the pain, but at the humiliation. For the first time in his life, his body is no longer his own. The prison now decides if he eats. The prison decides if he lives. And in that moment, the legend of his power begins to fade, even inside his own mind. When even the strong admit defeat, when he recovers, he doesn't speak of it. He doesn't test anymore. He simply accepts the trays, eating quietly, no matter what they contain. But on the back of one milk carton, hidden in pencil, guards later find a note. "It wasn't the cell that broke me, it was the food." And in that single sentence lies the terrifying truth of ADX Florence, a place where food isn't just about survival, it's about breaking the unbreakable. The routine that rules all. In ADX Florence, the design isn't just steel, locks, and concrete, it's ritual. Every door opens and shuts on schedule. Every light flickers on and off at the same time. And most importantly, every tray slides under every steel door at the exact same hour. Food is the heartbeat of the prison. Remove it, change it, or corrupt it, and the entire rhythm of ADX collapses. That's why meals here aren't just calories, they're control. Ghosts at the table. Psychologists who study Supermax prisons say many inmates suffer vivid food hallucinations. They smell fried chicken that isn't there. They taste pizza in their sleep. They dream of family dinners from decades ago, only to wake up to another cold, gray patty. For men trapped alone for decades, food is the last tether to the outside world, and also the cruelest reminder they'll never taste freedom again. One prisoner described it best: "Every bite is like eating my own past, and realizing it's gone forever. The true power of the tray." By the end of the hunger strike, by the end of force feeding, by the end of countless untouched trays, a chilling truth emerges inside ADX. It isn't violence that truly bends men. It isn't chains. It's the relentless monotony of the food, the tasteless meals, the punishment loaf, the silence of eating alone, the humiliation of being fed by force. Together they dig deeper than any shank or cell door ever could. ADX, Florence doesn't just cage bodies. It cages appetites, and by doing so, it breaks the mind. The cycle never ends. The hunger strike fades. The infamous inmate eats again. Guards stop their midnight runs. On the surface, order returns. But the silence that follows isn't peace, it's something darker, because every time a tray slides under a steel door, every man inside knows the truth. Here, food isn't freedom, it isn't comfort. It's the weapon that, it will be waiting for them tomorrow. And for many, that knowledge is harder to swallow than the food itself. The global weapon of food. While ADX Florence may be America's fortress of silence, it isn't the only place where food is used as a tool of sorrow. From New York's Rikers Island to South America's overcrowded prisons, food has been twisted into punishment, control, and sometimes revolt. Because in prisons everywhere, food is more than a meal, it's leverage. The smell of decay. In New York's notorious Rikers Island, former inmates describe meals that reek of moldy bread, sour milk, and gray mystery meat. For many, food isn't just bad, it's dehumanizing. Some trays are so spoiled that inmates trade them away just to avoid eating. Others hoard ramen noodles from commissary, using them like currency to survive. The message is clear: eat what you're given, or starve. But for prisoners at Rikers, food isn't just fuel. It's a reminder that society considers them disposable, starving for a voice. In 2011, inside California's Pelican Bay State Prison, over 6,000 inmates launched a hunger strike. Their demand wasn't freedom. It wasn't shorter sentences. It was simply this: an end to long-term solitary confinement and food that didn't feel like punishment. For weeks, men refused trays. The protest spread to prisons across the state. It was one of the largest hunger strikes in U.S. history. The strike proved something terrifying to prison authorities. Men locked in concrete boxes can still find power in the simplest refusal: by not eating, hunger as chaos. In Brazil and Venezuela, overcrowded prisons face a different problem. Food shortages mean meals often arrive late, cold, or not at all. When prisoners go days without eating, riots explode, kitchens are raided, guards attacked, and entire facilities spiral into chaos over something as small as rice and beans. For these prisons, food isn't just control, it's survival. And when survival slips, violence erupts. One truth. Across all prisons, whether it's the silent halls of ADX Florence, the rotting trays of Rikers Island, the united protest at Pelican Bay, or the chaos in South America, one truth emerges: food is never just food in prison. It is punishment. It is rebellion. It is control. It is freedom. And for inmates trapped in cages, sometimes the strongest weapon they hold isn't a blade or a plan to escape. It's the decision to eat or not to eat. More than calories. For people on the outside, food means taste, choice, comfort. For inmates, it means none of that. Every meal is bland, repetitive, silent. No smell of home-cooked food, no laughter across a table, no variety. Psychologists say this does something dangerous. The brain begins to starve for stimulation, even more than the body starves for calories. That's why so many prisoners dream of meals: steak, pizza, fried chicken. In solitary confinement, those dreams feel real. Waking up to another gray patty feels like heartbreak, eating as humiliation. The Loaf, a brick of mashed beans, bread, and vegetables, has been used in prisons across America as punishment. It's not poisonous, it's not unsafe, but it's tasteless, heavy, and soul-crushing. Inmates who've eaten it say it makes them feel less than human. One former prisoner wrote, "After 3 days of loaf, I didn't feel like a man anymore. I felt like an animal being fed slop." That's the point. The loaf isn't meant to nourish, it's meant to humiliate, to remind inmates, we control even your appetite. The loneliness of the tray. Humans are social eaters. We share meals at tables, swap stories, pass plates. It's how families bond. At ADX Florence, meals are taken alone, in silence, every single day, for years, for decades. Prison psychologists say eating in isolation changes the brain. Some men stop seeing food as food. They describe it as just another chain. Others lose the ability to enjoy eating altogether. When they are finally released or transferred, they struggle to sit at a dinner table with others. They feel anxious, overwhelmed, even guilty. Food, once comfort, becomes trauma. Hunger that never leaves. Prison food doesn't just affect inmates while they're locked up. It leaves scars that follow them outside. Former prisoners often hoard snacks, terrified of running out. Some wake up, at night, to eat in the dark, unable to shake the feeling of scarcity. Others say they never taste food the same way again. It always reminds them of cold trays and concrete walls. The truth is this: prison doesn't just steal time. It rewires the relationship between a man and his hunger, and nowhere is that clearer than in ADX Florence, where the tray isn't just a meal, it's a message. Words written in hunger, smuggled letters, court testimonies, and interviews with former inmates all reveal the same theme: the food is never just food. One ADX prisoner wrote in a legal complaint, "Every tray is punishment, cold, gray, flavorless. I stopped tasting years ago. Now I just swallow fuel and try not to think." Another man described the moment he snapped. "I threw the tray at the wall and screamed, not because I was angry, but because I realized I couldn't tell if it was breakfast or dinner anymore. Every meal looked the same. Edible cement." A former Illinois inmate who endured the punishment loaf explained it like this: "It's edible, sure, but so is cardboard. After 2 days of it, I prayed for hunger pains instead of another bite." Others said the loaf caused more than physical pain. It stripped them of dignity. One man wrote, "The loaf told me, you're not human, you're an animal. That's how they wanted me to feel." At ADX Florence, that same logic holds true. Meals aren't meant to satisfy, they're meant to remind. A protest letter that shook the courtroom. During one hunger strike at ADX, an inmate slipped a note to his lawyer that read, "They can force food into my body, but they can't force it into my soul." That single line made its way into a federal court filing, sparking outrage from rights groups. To the Bureau of Prisons, it was a legal problem. But to prisoners across the country, it was proof. Even silence could carry a message when hunger was the weapon. The meal that broke him. Perhaps the most haunting story comes from a man who had once sworn never to bend. After years of solitary meals, he confessed to a psychologist, "I didn't break when they chained me. I didn't break when they locked me alone. I broke when I realized I would never eat with another human being again." That's the hidden cruelty of ADX Florence. The food isn't just tasteless. It's designed to strip away the very thing that makes us human. Connection. Breakfast in silence. The first sound of the day isn't an alarm clock. It's the heavy clank of a steel door slot opening. A tray slides in. Scrambled eggs that taste like powdered chalk. A slice of toast, cold by the time it reaches the cell. A small carton of milk, sweating condensation. There's no dining hall, no clatter of silverware, no morning chatter. Just a man, a tray, and 4 concrete walls. He eats fast, not because he's hungry, but because there's nothing else to do. Breakfast takes 5 minutes. The silence lasts all day. Lunch, that feels the same, 6 p.m. Another tray slides in, this time, a meat patty, beans, and white bread. Always the same portions, always lukewarm. Inmates say lunch is the hardest. Morning strength has worn off, and the boredom sets in. For some, it's the moment they crack. One man confessed, "I used to throw lunch against the wall, just to feel like something changed in my day." For others, it's routine. Eat, stare at the wall, wait. Between meals, from noon until evening, there's nothing. No activity, no conversation, no stimulation. Many inmates describe this as the real punishment. Not the food itself, but the endless waiting until the next tray. Some pace, some sleep, some sit on the floor, listening through vents, trying to catch whispers from other cells. But the hunger and monotony chew at the mind. Psychologists call this time distortion. Days blend together, marked only by the taste, or lack of taste, on the tray. The final tray for 30 p.m. Dinner arrives early. Chicken stew, or what's called stew, over rice, a piece of cornbread, a packet of Kool-Aid mix. For some inmates, it's the best meal of the day. For others, it's the cruelest, because after this, there's nothing until morning. By night, the prison falls into complete silence. Inmates lie awake, stomachs empty, minds racing. Some dream of real meals, only to wake up to another gray tray tomorrow. And that cycle repeats, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. When routine turns to obsession, some men begin saving scraps of food, hiding them in corners, under mattresses, even inside the cracks of their cells. Not because they're starving, but because hoarding gives them a sense of control. Psychologists note this behavior is common in solitary. The brain craves ownership over something, anything. And in ADX Florence, the only thing to control is food. One guard described finding a prisoner with dozens of hardened bread rolls stacked like bricks, his collection. When asked why, the inmate simply said, "Because they're mine, making meals last." To fight the crushing boredom, some inmates turn eating into ritual. One man would cut his cornbread into 30 tiny squares, eating one every 5 minutes so his meal would last longer. Another mixed everything on the tray into one pile, so I wouldn't know what bite came next. But for others, the rituals grow darker. A prisoner once smeared food across the wall in patterns, telling staff it was art. Another ground his cornbread into powder and blew it into the air like incense. The guards laughed. Psychologists didn't. They knew it wasn't a joke. It was survival, when hunger becomes violence. Sometimes, desperation explodes. One prisoner flung his tray of stew at a guard through the food slot, splattering hot broth across his uniform. He was dragged out, shackled, and punished with the dreaded loaf. Another, starving after days of protest, tried to eat toilet paper soaked in water, just to feel something in his stomach. And in one chilling case, a man bit his own arm until he bled, whispering that at least the pain reminded him he was alive. Food as a mirror of the mind. For inmates who spend years, sometimes decades, in isolation, meals become mirrors of their mental state. Some lose all appetite, wasting away, their trays stacking untouched. Others gorge on every crumb, terrified of the hunger returning. The monotony of the food doesn't just fill or starve the stomach. It erodes the sense of time, of choice, of humanity. As one former inmate put it, "I didn't count days, I counted trays. And after a while, I stopped knowing if I was counting up or counting down, when food sparked fire." In one infamous incident at ADX Florence, the food slots themselves became weapons. Inmates shoved their trays back in unison, slamming them against the metal doors so hard that the echo shook the entire tier. Guards described it as a thunderstorm inside concrete. It wasn't a riot with fists or flames, it was a riot of hunger. And it terrified the staff more than knives ever could, because it showed that even the most isolated men could unite through one thing: refusal to eat when the tray is the last straw. For some, the food didn't just break their bodies, it broke their minds. One man smeared stew over his own skin, claiming it was armor. Another refused to eat for so long he had to be force-fed for months, his body skeletal but his will unbroken. And at least one prisoner, after years of endless monotony, ended his own life after pushing his final tray away. To the prison, these were statistics. To the men inside, it was proof. Food wasn't survival. It was surrender, more than a meal. After decades of stories, riots, protests, hallucinations, forced feedings, one truth about ADX Florence becomes undeniable. Here, food is never just food. It is punishment. It is control. It is rebellion. And most of all, it is the slow drip of power that eats away at the mind, one tray at a time. The outside world sees ADX Florence as steel, barbed wire, and concrete. But ask the men inside, and many will tell you, their prison isn't built of walls. It's built of trays. Every clank of steel against the door is a reminder that they are no longer men with choices, but bodies to be fed or starved at the will of the system. In the end, the most feared prison in America doesn't break inmates with beatings or riots. It breaks them with breakfast. And that's the terrifying truth of ADX Florence. The food doesn't just fill you, it defines you. Because, in a place where silence rules and walls never move, the real prison isn't the cell, it's what's on the tray. But ADX Florence is just one chapter. Across the world, from Rikers to Pelican Bay to prisons in South America, food has been turned into the cruelest weapon of all. And in some places, it doesn't just break minds, it fuels uprisings.